Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm so pleased that you have joined us, have taken the time. I think this is going to be a very informative session about the PIAAC Skills Map. I'm Dr. Don Finn. I am the president of the board of directors for the Coalition on Adult Basic Education. And on behalf of my colleagues at COABE, I do welcome you to this webinar. I think we are in store for an excellent presentation to gain some understanding into looking at the skills map as it relates to the PIAAC data. We have a team of some great folks here who have strong background and knowledge. We're going to make sense of all of this for us. And for those of you certainly who are governors, we welcome you. Governor staffers, we welcome you as well for this informative time. So it's my pleasure to toss it now to Sharon Bonney. Sharon Bonney is the Chief Executive Officer of the Coalition on Adult Basic Education. She's been with COABE for a number of years, started off as a part-time administrator manager type person, has worked her way up to the role of CEO. She's done a terrific job of interfacing and working with the board of directors to grow the Coalition of Adult Basic Education from about 1,300 members to about 28,000 members in the span a little over a decade. And so she is a woman of great energy, great drive, and great vision. She is an excellent colleague with whom to work, and she is a terrific networker as well. So without further ado, Sharon, I pass it on to you.
Thank you so much, Don. I appreciate that. And welcome everybody. It's Adult Education and Family Literacy Week. We're very excited about that. We have been celebrating all week long. We've had a number of different activities lined up, and one of these is this right here, this webinar that we have, the PIAAC Skills Map, Adult Skills in Literacy and Numeracy at the state and county levels. We're very excited to be presenting this for the National Governors Association. And before we get going, I just want to say that this is specifically a follow-up to the presentation that COABE did on September 2nd to the Reskilling and Recovery Network. The title of that was Adult Education and Economic Catalyst. We really feel there's a big tie-in for education issues that impact the workforce. We know that there's 51.4 million low-skilled adults in literacy and 75.1 million low-skilled adults in numeracy. So a really serious economic impact for the workforce. When we think about the return on investment, and we know that 2.5 billion in tax revenue and reduced expenses for every 400,000 adults who earn a high school diploma. We look at the savings there, and it's amazing, $6,250 per person, as well as the $200 billion of estimated value to our economy in reduced costs for public support programs for low literacy adults. So we really feel that this is a very important, numeracy and literacy is very important to the economy, and this is why we had asked that this presentation would take place specifically for governors. So without further ado, I'd like to read the bios here. I'm going to read them to make sure I don't miss anything important. I'm going to start first with Stephen Provaznik. He's the National Center for Education Statistics. He works at the U.S. Department of Education's National Center for Education Statistics as the branch chief of the International Activities Branch. Previously, he worked at the U.S. National Research Coordinator for TIMS. Dr. Provaznik has also previously served as the U.S. National Research Coordinator for the Progress in Reading Literacy Studies, and he was one of the U.S. coordinators for PIAAC and the 2012 International Study of Adult Literacy Numeracy. So wow, we have a real expert with us here. And then Tom Krenzke, the key expert of the Skills Map, is a Vice President and Senior Statistician in the Westat Statistics and Evaluation Science Unit. He's Director of Sampling Activities for PIAAC in the U.S. and is Senior Lead Statistician within the PIAAC International Consortium. He has over 25 years of experience in statistical research and software development, including emphasis on sample design for household surveys and small area estimations. Mr. Krenzke is a Fellow of the American Statistical Association, Chair of ASA Committee on Privacy and Confidentiality, and past President of the Washington Statistical Society. He also leads Westat's Steering Committee on WesDaX, Westat's real-time online table generator, and also serves on the Westat Institutional Review Board. So here again, a real expert. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to turn this over to our lead presenter here, Tom Krenzke, and I will be off screen behind the scenes. Thanks so much. So Tom, if you just want to open that up right there at the top, we can, the next one right next to it, there you go. Yep, and click present. Also, we can't hear you.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you for the informative introduction to this webinar. And also thank you all for being here virtually. It's a real privilege to be here. And before I get to a demonstration of the new skills map that includes state and county indicators of adult literacy and numeracy, I'll provide a brief background on the data and the methodology that was used. And here are two sets of national statistics that Sharon also showed. Over 1 in 5 adults are at risk for difficulties with literacy, that is using or comprehending print material. This translates to over 51 million individuals 16 to 74 years old. Also, about 1 in 3 are at risk for difficulties with numeracy. This translates to over 75 million adults. These are adults who can only count, sort, or do simple one-step algebraic operations like adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. These numbers are reported from a national assessment of adult skills called PIAAC. So PIAAC stands for the Program for the International Assessment of Adult Competencies, and it involved over 35 countries in cycle 1, which occurred between 2012 and 2017. In the US, PIAAC is sponsored by the National Center for Education Statistics. There were 3 data collections in cycle 1, which occurred in 2012, 14, and 17. And these data collections were combined together to increase the sample size for the estimation process that I'll be discussing. The data collections were facilitated through a background questionnaire and an assessment of literacy and numeracy skills in English and digital problem solving. There were 12,330 US adults between the ages of 16 and 74 living in households that were surveyed. To collect the data, a complex sample design was employed for each data collection, and it was designed for national estimates. However, there's been a lot of interest in creating estimates for states and counties. And to do so, we used small area estimation methodology. And this methodology in general includes a variety of statistical techniques to predict survey outcomes for smaller geographies. This is very challenging for US PIAAC because it has sample in most states, but only sample in 185 counties. Therefore, the goal is to build a strong model on the 185 counties to predict estimates for the 3141 counties in the US and the 50 states in the District of Columbia. We had methodology to build upon from a previous national assessment with county and state components in 2003, with one outcome estimated related to low literacy adults, which is analogous to PIAAC's at or below level 1 in literacy. This area level model for PIAAC was used to generate estimates for 8 outcomes, including literacy and numeracy average scores, and 3 percentages, at or below level 1, which is low proficiency, level 2, which is medium proficiency, and 1 for at or above level 3, which is high proficiency. This model, the model used for the PIAAC survey, results in conjunction with 2013-2017 data from the Census Bureau's American Community Survey. While PIAAC only has sample in most states and in just a few counties, the American Community Survey has data for all states and counties on topics related to the PIAAC proficiency estimates, such as education attainment, poverty, race, ethnicity, health insurance, and service occupations. And these variables were all used in the final model. And the final model was subjected to rigorous diagnostic checks and sensitivity checks before predictions were made for all the counties and for all the states. And lastly, there's credible intervals that are provided to indicate how confident the user can be in the estimates. One of the products from the skills map efforts are state snapshots, and shown here for South Dakota, the snapshots give high level summary numbers. And here is shown South Dakota's average literacy score of 271, which is statistically higher than that of the nation. And 15% are at or below level 1 in literacy. And a sort of the state averages is given with the state highlighted here in the middle. On the next page of the state snapshot, counties are sorted from highest average literacy score to the lowest. The same information is provided for numeracy. And it was basically, this has been a large effort to get to this point, and it took a large team in order to accomplish the end result in generating estimates and creating the skills map. A couple of highlights is that we had on the team a senior advisor who had led the small area estimation work on adult literacy last decade. We also had the co-author at Westat of one of the first, if not the first, papers in small area estimation. And also the author who wrote the main book on small area estimation was our consultant, and an international expert panel which helped to take into consideration the latest research. And a special thanks goes to NCES for sponsoring this work. With the US PIAAC Skills Map, you can explore the variation in adult skills across states and counties for 8 outcomes. You can compare states and counties through statistically valid analyses. You can analyze data with downloadable Excel file data from there, which provide proficiency estimates in literacy and numeracy. It provides data from ACS on area characteristics, and also the ability to link adult skills data with other available data sources. And lastly, the skills map provides the basis for your own individual research and reports to gain insights into implications for research, policy, and practice. So here's an example of using linked data that you can download with the ACS and PIAAC small area estimates. The purpose of this example is to see what counties to focus on in Florida that have a high proportion with no health insurance and also low literacy. By using the link downloaded data downloaded from the skills map, I created the scatter plot that reveals 2 counties that stand apart, and the data on the left show that the 2 data points are for Hendry and DeSoto counties in Florida. And one can now think about what kinds of resources, financial as well as educational, that could be provided for these counties in order for them to have access to health insurance. So just stepping aside from the discussion on the skills map a second, and before we get into the demo, I wanted to share one slide here on the status of PIAAC, and Stephen will go through this later a bit more. But cycle 2, so what skills map is based on cycle 1 of PIAAC, and cycle 2 of PIAAC is currently underway in the US, and state participation is still possible. And so you're encouraged to contact Holly G for more information. The main study data collection will take place August 2022 through March 2023. And the next international and national PIAAC data are scheduled to be released in 2024, including better measurement of lowest skills in numeracy, and also financial literacy background questionnaires in the US only. So some other thoughts as we head into the demo is to think about broad state and community efforts that are needed to help those in need with policies or practices, especially for areas with larger numbers of low skilled population. This could include possibly partnering with counties to share ideas about what works well, what isn't working well, and hearing new ideas, and possibly partner with other adjacent states such as coalitions in bordering states. While also keeping in mind who are the providers of the survey services, the funds, and what business and education platforms are needed. Okay, so now I'll share a demo of the skills map. Okay, and so again, the skills map is for estimates of adults' proficiency in literacy and numeracy. And although you don't see it now, when you enter the skills map, you'll see a welcome window. And that window has some high-level background on PIAAC. And the skills map interactive design allows for views of heat maps, summary cards, and comparisons resulting from statistical testing. So here you see a county level heat map of the US for the percentage at or below level 1 in literacy. And this heat map shows the great variation of adult skills and literacy across the US counties. On the left side, we see that there's some choices to select literacy and numeracy and to select one of the 4 outcomes, including percentages at or below level 1, at level 2, and at or above level 3 in the average scale score. And when I click an outcome, we can see the heat map change for the selected outcome. So let's go back and select at or above level 1. And the key on the bottom right-hand side shows that lighter tints are for counties with higher literacy, and counties with darker tints have lower literacy. In general, you can see that the northern areas from the Mountain West to the Northeast tend to have higher literacy, while, for example, areas with lower literacy performers in the English test include counties on the US-Mexican border and in the lower Mississippi River area. You can see some tooltips here with the icons as you hover over these small icons to explain the levels, the percentages, and the averages. And these tooltips are included in all the parts of the tool. Let's click on more details to get some information on the precision and how much confidence you can have on these estimates. And when we click on low confidence, there's actually one county in Montana with an estimate where the precision level is low. And these classifications of confidence levels are aligned with the NCES statistical standards. When I click on the moderate confidence levels, we see these counties outlined as well as the one with the low confidence level. And when I click on the high confidence level, we see all the rest of the counties, and with the ones that have low and moderate confidence levels still highlighted. So also we have another way to show the uncertainty surrounding the heat map itself that can be seen with this dynamic map, but I don't have the time to explain that today. You can actually look at the icon for more information or just send me a note and I'll be happy to explain it. But it does show another way of explaining the uncertainty around the heat map that you see on the landing page. So I'm going to go through 3 case studies to show the usefulness of the skills map. So for the first one, we went back to this heat map. We're going to go to the at or below level 1 map again for literacy. And I'm interested in Minnesota and the implications of adult skills levels on research, policy, and practice. And one thing that catches my eye are 2 adjacent counties in the southwest of Minnesota where one has a light tint and the other has a darker tint. So there's one with a light tint down here and one with a darker tint there. It's kind of hard to see, so you can zoom in different ways using your mouse. There's some controls over here on the right. And also, if you have a touch screen, you can just use your fingers. In this way, we can see the 2 counties clearly. And when hovering over the counties, I see that one is called Jackson County and the other is called Nobles County. I'm going to hover over Jackson County And this is the county where my mom's side of the family is from. And you might have been able to tell through my accent. I grew up in Minnesota. You can see that the county estimate for the percentage at or below level 1 is the same as the state estimate, which is lower than the national model-based estimate. You can zoom out different ways using the controls or the mouse. And so when I click on Jackson here, it brings up a county summary card. And in the county summary card, we can see the location of Jackson within the state of Minnesota. We see on the right side results of a statistical test that already happened, and we can see them in these large icons. The icons show that there's not enough evidence to claim any difference in the Jackson average literacy and numeracy scores from the state average. If there was a significantly greater average score, a large arrow pointed up would appear, and if a significantly lower average score, a large downward pointed arrow would appear. And these statistical tests are written out here for all 8 outcomes, and consistent with the icons. For the average literacy score, it says that there's no notable difference, and the same for numeracy. And here on the left are bar charts, including the bar chart for the percentages for both literacy and numeracy, and also for the average, and including the percentages. And so if you want to see state data, you can click here. And this is the part of the chart that aligns with the large icons with the average scale score noted here. And when you hover over the number, the average, you'll see that this is the credible interval for that estimate. The credible interval for the average literacy says that it is highly likely the target quantity is between 266 and 284, and our best guess is 275. To help better understand the resulting estimates, we can investigate using additional variables that are county level percentages from the American Community Survey. In this window that I'm going to click on, we can select up to 8 variables to show on the bar chart, on a bar chart. So I'm going to select Hispanic, percent less than high school, percent below 100% of poverty line, foreign-born population, speak English not well or not at all, unemployed, service occupation, and no health insurance. So some of those are in the model for small area estimation and some are not, but those are the ones that I'm interested for this county. And you can see some of the statistics that help explain a high level of literacy in Jackson. One example is the low percentage with no health insurance. So we can also compare Jackson to other counties in the state. And I'm not sure this is going to work, but I'm going to try it. So if I click on here, I'm not sure if you see that, but there's
yes, it opens.
Oh, thank you very much. There's a PDF that popped up. And so there's a cover page here, and then the table of contents shows each outcome. And clicking on the at or below level 1, we can see a graph of the county estimates sorted by the estimates value. The point estimate and the credible intervals clearly showed some differences among the percentage at or below level 1 across the counties. And this chart runs across 2 pages due to the large number of counties in Minnesota. And Jackson is actually here in the middle of the second page. On the first page are the counties with lower literacy levels relative to others in the state, and one of which is Nobles here at the top. Let me see if I can get back to skills map here. Okay. And so let's compare Jackson to Nobles, which again is a neighboring county just to the west of Jackson. And doing this in order to determine ways to reduce the difference and improve the literacy level in Nobles. So I want to compare Jackson and Nobles to understand these differences. So I'm going to find Nobles here and select Nobles. And here they become on here side by side, so you can see them where they're located in the state. And the analysis results are generated for the 8 outcomes and shows that Jackson has higher proficiency than Nobles. And as seen side by side are the bar charts. For example, you can see the bar for the average that aligns with the statistical testing results text. Scrolling further down, we can see the ACS estimates that were selected before this side by side between the 2 counties, which it helps explain the differences in the proficiency outcomes. The percentages are for Nobles are all very large, which are all in the direction of being associated with lower literacy levels. For example, looking at the percentage who do not speak English well, one can see the difference in that percentage for the 2 counties, 37 for Nobles and 11 for Jackson. So this basically demonstrated how one can identify areas in your state that may initiate policies or further research toward improvements in adult skills in those areas. So I'm going to close out here. Now we're going to look across state boundaries at another case study, and one can see at the map, you can see counties that are close in prevalence. And so suppose that an educational entrepreneur wants to help set up English as a second language arrangements to further advance services in locations in the Southwest. So scanning this map, there are 2 counties that straddle state boundaries. One is Imperial County in California, and the other is Yuma County in Arizona. And both of these have very low literacy, as shown here, 50% for Imperial and 42% at or below level 1 for Yuma. And clicking here on Imperial, you get the county summary card, and they have over 100,000 population, and Yuma does as well. And when we get the statistical test here against the state average showing below, the average is below the state average. And as a check, let's look at their characteristics. So I'm just going to click on less than high school, Hispanic, and below the poverty level, and see its characteristics. See a high Hispanic population and so forth, and high poverty and low education, for example. And so the entrepreneur may want to focus a little more on them, but let's compare to Yuma side by side. So Yuma, Arizona. And so we do see their location on the map. We see they're pretty close in how it relates to outcomes. However, there is a statistical result where Imperial County is percentage at or below level 1 is statistically higher than Yuma. And looking at the characteristics, we can see slightly higher percentages for Imperial than Yuma. So the entrepreneur may want to focus a little more on Imperial due to this statistical result, but also because of the similarities and potential needs in the 2 counties, maybe there could be a partnership developed between the 2 states to help those counties out. All right, one more case study here. So let's go to the numeracy map, and let's go at or above level 3. And suppose a financial firm or an insurance company wants to expand and find places for a new establishment or a new headquarters in the Northwest. In scanning the map, I can see two counties that straddle state boundaries, Whitman County here and Latah County of Idaho. Both of these counties have very high numeracy populations, with over half of their population proficient in numeracy, so 51% and 53%. And that is, they can engage in complex reasoning and about quantities and data. So clicking on Whitman, so I see that there's about 39,000 in the population. So there might be a need to expand the population base. And so let's look at Latah. And so they have about 30,000 in population. So that about doubles the population base if we look at them together. So clicking on comparing to another county, I can select Whitman County, Washington. And by the way, if I accidentally clicked on a different county, you can actually choose different counties here on the map. So, but here's the Whitman County here, and I see that there's no significant difference in at or above level 3 in numeracy. And suppose I want to look at some of these variables. I just pick these 3 again. And they're basically very similar in population distributions. And so essentially by grouping these two counties together, it expands the population base to another county with similar characteristics to be able to treat their needs. So let's go back to the heat map here. And I'm going to click on state, and basically everything that I have explained for counties can be explained for states. So I'm not going to go through all that. And here's the download link. You can download data. An Excel file would pop up, and it's available. That includes the point estimates, the credible intervals, and the covariates. And this data can be merged with your research data that might reveal important associations for counties and states. And there are other controls here on the right, and the question mark here gives a good discussion about the methodology and also a link to the methodology report. Okay, and now I want to go lastly to the main web page for the US state and county estimates for PIAAC. And some highlights here are the commissioner's statement from NCES that was released in June. And here's analysis of states and counties with the highest and lowest levels of adult literacy and numeracy. So when I click on this, maybe if you see it, it goes through the top 25% of the states, of the highest performing states in gold, and you can see the lowest performing states in maroon, and you can really see the distinction between the north and the south there. And then you can also see a list here of highest performing counties and the lowest performing counties in this document. There's also a couple videos, including a tutorial video that's available to check out. And further down are links to find out more about literacy levels here. And there's a link here to the methodology report again. And there's also some frequently asked questions as well. There's 11 here. So this concludes the demonstration. And so while general highlights have been provided about the overall picture of the US, the main focus was to show you how to navigate the site to illustrate the website's capabilities for constructing the basis for your own individual research and reports. So now I think I turn it over to Stephen for a discussion about more about PIAAC and how this tool can be useful. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Tom. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
I'm just going to pick up on that. Tom, I'm very grateful for the tour, showing people the various resources, but most of all for having actually developed that wonderful intuitive skills map. The very fact that we can make available so much data in such an easy and accessible way has really done wonders for making these data accessible. We at NCES, the National Center for Education Statistics, are not a policy shop. The Department of Ed is in charge of policy, but we collect the data and produce the data, and to make it easily and accessible so it can be of value and applied for people who are trying to apply it to policy is what we do. I want to just kind of recap quickly. Besides the map, which is available on the website that you can go to, the data are available through the download that Tom mentioned at the very bottom. So you can download all the data that are in the tool, whether you want it for every county in the country or you want it just for every county in your state. In addition, I'm going to ask if Bonnie can put back up an Educate and Elevate website, which shows where there's access to the snapshots that Tom gave a preview. He showed us the South Dakota snapshot, and these are available for each one of the states. And I believe there's an example here for New York State. The Educate and Elevate website has this information in an easy to find format, along with other great data that the COAB makes available. It's the middle one here, kind of small, the North Dakota, the New York snapshot. Again, the blue at the top shows you that you're looking at literacy results. When you slide down farther, you will get green results. Green indicates the numeracy results. And the way that the map is set up, you always can know whether you're seeing literacy or numeracy results based on the quick color coding. So just as a quick mnemonic, remember blue literacy, green numeracy. Also, I just want to put in a plug that the levels that we have here, Tom did a nice job of explaining how we have the 8 different levels. I would just add a definition that the different levels are used, even though it can be kind of off-putting to say level 1, level 2, think about them as each level has a set of characteristic concrete skills that are associated with them. So that is to say, anyone who makes it to a level 1, you know what sort of skills that they can accomplish. And when Tom presented the stats at the very beginning that said that there were 51 million adults who are in low literacy, that indicates that they have not been able to attain or reach what we say is level 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. Each one of those levels is associated, as I said, with concrete skills. So for example, for numeracy, Tom basically spelled out how level 1 is being able to sort with numbers and do simple one-step processes, adding, subtracting, perhaps multiplying, but that they would not be able to do skills that would be associated at level 2, which is example, working with fractions, knowing the difference between 1/4 and 1/3, which is larger. If you remember, once upon a time, there was a campaign to try and knock out the McDonald's quarter pounder by introducing a 1/3 burger. But the 1/3 pounder was considered by many people smaller, and therefore, even though it was the same price, they thought they were getting less for their value for their money. That difference of being able to recognize a 1/3 as larger than 1/4 is level 2 skill. That sort of concreteness is associated with each one of the levels, and if you want to go onto the NCS website, you can find what those are, which is sometimes helpful to understand more than just these generic abstract descriptions. Besides having that set of sort of concrete skills and the snapshot, we have a variety of examples of the questions that have been asked so that you can see, such as I'm trying to spell out here in terms of a difference of fractions, you can see the sort of questions that are actually asked of participants. None of the questions in PIAAC are at any significantly high levels. Nothing would come close to what are considered high school sort of level of math, high school level of reading. We are working with very basic levels of adult literacy and numeracy, and that's important to keep in mind. The other thing that I want to make sure that I cover before I open up the floor to questions is simply the value of the data, if you're interested for your state, to have more state data. I just tried to describe the data that's available that Tom summarized through the NCES website. What is not on the NCES website are data at the state level for digging in, because what we have are only the data that are based on estimates from what Tom describes as the technique of the small area estimates. State samples are also possible. Oh, sorry, I see I don't have it open the full screen. Let's get it to open up. And I want to speak about the benefits of a state data collection that is distinct from what Tom showed, to the degree that while we are able to do analysis for the entire nation of relationships between training, labor experience, jobs, and look at the relationships between low-skilled English language learners, the unemployed, and their levels of skill. We can't do that at the state level, even using the skills map, because that is only giving us a projection, an estimate for the overall skills at the state and county level. But because they're based on models, we don't actually have the underlying data to dig down into them. We can dig down on the national level, and we can take a look at any one of these sort of categories that I'm going to describe now, but at a state level, one has to have a state sample that would be robust enough to be able to dig down into the data. We are able, with state data, to help states, sorry, let me see if I can get that to stop ringing. We are able to provide data that states could have for helping set priorities, making decisions that have to do with allocating money between state, county, and city resources. In addition, with state data, states would be able to analyze their data, look at their scores, and benchmark those against OECD averages, the US as a whole, or any other state. For states who participated in earlier rounds of NCES data collections, such as NALS and NAL, that's the National Adult Literacy Study, or the National Assessment of Adult Literacy in 2003, there were various states who participated in them. Those states would be able to directly compare what the changes are in their population's literacy. Not numeracy, because numeracy was not collected in NALS, but they would be able to track and see growth or decline for their state populations. And that has to do with the very fact that PIAAC scores and the NALS and NAL scores have been put on the same scale, so you can directly compare. Another benefit of states participating in PIAAC for cycle 2 is the very fact that you are saving money from not having to do an independent sort of sample and study by yourself. States wouldn't have to pay for sampling or design or for the development of the instruments. They don't even have to pay for a field trial. And there would be basically a discount by being part of the national sample that NCES is conducting, a discount on the survey operations, the actual collection of the data. And states would get their results released a year after the data collection, the same time that the national results are released. And that is in 2024, as Tom mentioned. What are the sort of questions that one could ask? If one had state data, you could take a look. I put on the screen here a variety of sort of questions that would allow you to, that you could dig into if you had state data. And basically the distinction I'm trying to draw out here is what it is that you can't answer based on the skills map. So as great and helpful as having county level estimates are, there are a variety of sort of research or policy questions that can't be answered from the PIAAC Skills Map, and these try and give an example of that. And they have to do with the relationships between, for example, low-skilled, high-skilled workers and their participation in formal and informal education and training. Those are questions that are asked in the background questionnaire of participants, and one can dig into those data to see what patterns there are among subpopulations, among those who respond in particular ways in terms of what their employment status is, or by looking at different demographic information. In addition, the PIAAC also collects information about how people report the use of their skills. So how much reading, writing, or numeracy, or ICT, which is the use of IT in the US, but the international name is ICT, for your digital skills. How much of those are you reporting using in your workplace and in your everyday life? PIAAC collects both workplace and home and everyday life use. The plans for the next round of PIAAC, which is referred to as Cycle 2, are that we will have a national sample. The national sample has been delayed because of the coronavirus by 1 year. We would have gone into the field in 2021. Now we will be going into the field in 2022, if all goes well. And the idea is that we would have aim for about 6,000 completed cases. That is far smaller than the almost 13,000 cases that Tom mentioned went into the development of the PIAAC Skills Map. However, that is the amount that we would need for a national sample. And when we first did PIAAC the first time, we had about 5,000. We added 3,000 or so every additional time we went out in the field. And if the US were to go out again, it might be possible to have enough sample to create a new skills map updated based on Cycle 2. The difference between Cycle 1 and Cycle 2 largely turns on updating the questions. So Cycle 1 relied on many questions that came from earlier adult assessments, international adult assessments of adult literacy, and some of the questions were old. Now that we have established a link between the old assessments and PIAAC, many of the older items will probably be dropped. For example, there was a question that asked people looking up something in a Yellow Pages, which no longer is a relevant literacy question for most people, if they even know what a Yellow Pages are anymore. More questions are being added that have digital content to them and digital literacy. In addition, there are far more sort of numeracy examples that have digital elements to them. Those are what are being added to Cycle 2, in addition to detailed questions to focus more on the lower end of numeracy skills, because one of the findings of PIAAC was the real value that numeracy is an indicator of in the unemployment, and in the United States, we found high correlations with incarceration. Something is happening that numeracy is perhaps a greater predictor than literacy for performance and employment of adults. That can be explored more, and to allow further exploration, these additional questions are being added for a lower level numeracy components, as it's being called, range of measures. In addition, as Tom mentioned, financial literacy is being added to the US version of PIAAC so that we would have a very good set of information about financial habits, financial knowledge, and how comfortable people are with making financial decisions. The state sample here are the information for the direct sample. If you were to have a state sample, you would need at least 1,000 adults. The cost is very high because PIAAC is very expensive. Literally, it involves visiting individuals who are sampled. In the past, we've knocked on their houses, found out if they'd be willing to take the survey through an individual visit of an interviewer and then an actual interview. The range is estimated 3 to 3.2 million for each state. A contract would be necessary with the national contractor. The U.S. government has selected Westat, which is Tom's company, to conduct the Cycle 2 for PIAAC, and they will follow the OECD. That's the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. That is the international agency that actually has created PIAAC and is coordinating it across the 30+ countries that are participating in Cycle 2. They have set the procedures, the standards, and the U.S. participates in that. If a state wanted to join, their results would be included in the OECD's international report and in the U.S. results, and they would, of course, have the data themselves that they could produce their own report. But most important, they'd have their own state-level data that they could analyze and look at in as many different ways as are practical and policy relevant for their particular needs. The timeline here, just quickly summing up, that any state that would be interested in participating should inform NCES of their interest by next May. They would need a contract signed with the contractor, Westat, by September 2021. The national data collection would then begin in August of 2022, and it would last and run through March 2023. Again, the final report would be released in the late fall of 2024. I'm going to, and let's see, I guess I can put here some resources and leave that on the page. I want to make sure that there's time for questions, so I'm going to stop here and open the floor for Sharon to see what questions have come in.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Stephen. I see one question here. Will digital literacy problem solving in a technology-rich environment information by state counties be available at any point in the near future?
That's a great question. Tom, do you want to answer that, or you want me just to,
Sure, I'll go ahead and
answer that?
do it. Yeah, there's different reasons why reporting on problem solving is problematic at the county level. And so they're not included on the skills map. One is because the percentage of people who completed the assessment on a computer is likely to vary from county to county. And results could be misleading because county estimates, it could represent different percentages of the population as well as different populations. And also, you know, complicating that as well is that people were encouraged to use, while people were encouraged to use the computer for the assessment as they were able, the percentage using the computer could be influenced by personal preference as well. And also, just maybe a little more technically, you know, because it's a portion of the sample that would be doing it on a computer, the estimates could have larger standard errors and depend on estimates of the county use per county. Yeah,
I'll just say that we did look into whether we could reliably estimate those for each of the counties, and it was determined that it just didn't meet the NCES statistical standards to have valid enough data. So unfortunately, we weren't able to. Yeah, the next round of cycle 2 of PIAAC will also include problem solving, and all of cycle 2 is going to be conducted. Or the idea is that it will all be conducted in electronic formats.
Great, and I don't see any other questions here. So I just want to say, you know, thank you to you gentlemen for taking the time. I know we have real experts here. I'm very excited that you're both able to present. I'm looking forward to sharing this out on the Reskilling and Recovery Network with the governors. And I want to thank those that took the time today to attend, and just thank you both for your time and your expertise.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for all the work that you and COAB are doing, and all the work that the National Governors Association does in helping support the governors. It's a tough job, and made tougher under the coronavirus. And if there's anything we can do that could further help in getting the data out, please let us know. That's what we're here for. Thank you. Thank
you, Stephen. Did you have anything you wanted to say, Tom?
Just thank you for the opportunity. It's been a real pleasure and privilege, and I hope the skills map can be useful to many states.
Yes, a lot of work went into that. I am sure. Yes, thank you so much. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Don Finn to see if he has any closing words.
I just want to thank you both, Tom and Stephen, for demonstrating this powerful tool. I think that, you know, when you look at an interactive map like this that has some strong data behind it, it clearly can be a very powerful tool for those in decision-making capacities to, you know, to really, to determine where the need is and perhaps where funding should go and so on. We certainly hope that it be used in that manner. And we do appreciate both of you gentlemen for taking the time to provide this demonstration and so on. And we look forward to the future of your of the project as well. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you to everybody who was able to attend. We appreciate it.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks everybody. Take care. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.